We see in that first reading, after yesterday's reading, when the apostles were let out of jail by the angel and they returned to the synagogue to continue teaching the people, they were again arrested and brought before the Sanhedrin. And yet, they speak out against the Sanhedrin, telling them exactly what they thought. But they were not against, and they were not there to put down the Sanhedrin or the priests. They were there to let them know what they were doing was the right thing. That they were putting their obedience to God before their obedience to man. Because somewhere along the line, these apostles were told by the Sanhedrin not to preach the good news of Jesus' resurrection. And yet they went ahead and they continued to preach. They were there to make sure that this word kept going. This is what God wanted them to do. And this is more important to them, to be obedient to God, which reigns first in their lives. And yet we look at the saint of the day, Stanislaus. He was kind of that way. He was born in 1030 and died in martyred in 1079. But yet he lived his life. He was ordained a priest, became a bishop, and he was quite outspoken against those government officials because of their evil, their corruptness, and their treatment of the people. He was willing to keep speaking out, even though he was threatened with death. And he continued so. And at one point, the king ordered his soldiers to kill Stanislaus, which the soldiers refused to do. So the king himself killed Stanislaus. But we have to kind of look at it, at the thing that Stanislaus was along with John the Baptist, Thomas Becket, and Thomas More. Those people stood out, and among many, stood out against the evilness and the corruption of the government with which they lived. This brings back to the thing that we need to obey God's law before man's law. When we seem to think that we need to obey man's law before God's law, there's a darkness in our faith. There's a lack of faith within us. Have we lost it completely? No. But it has taken a turn. We need to look at it. And if we follow God's law, if we follow it true, we will obey man's law. Because most of man's laws are based upon God's law. But we have to choose. We have to make the right choice. Because following man's law doesn't bring us to everlasting life. But following God's law and continue to follow God's law and not to stray from God's law will bring us to eternal life, for which Jesus gave up his life